failure in their life and then rise to the fame that made them successful? The answer that Napoleon Hill gave is that when they were all at the proverbial bottom of the barrel, where life had beat them down so much they were at the lowest place they had ever been in their life. When they got to that place in their life, something happened. They were completely stripped of all of their comforts, everything. They were bare naked. And at that point, what happened next was that they said, I will never, ever let life do this to me again. Well, that's pretty motivational. If you wake up one day and you just declare that I have had enough, period. I have had enough. And if you get like that, you're probably going to be ready to stop worrying about what other people think and to just finally get out there and go do it. Okay, well, that's what we all have to get to, I believe, if we really want to go into a life that is not just taking what life deals out to us. So that's a good thing. Now, let me talk about choices for a minute here. I want to give you a little more of the definition from Oxford Dictionary of choices. Choice is a noun. It's an act of choosing between two or more possibilities. For example, the choice between good and evil. A synonym for choices is that you can say that you have the right or ability to choose. I had to do it. I had no choice. Well, that's not really where we're going. I'd like to say that another thing for choices, that's a sentence, a range of possibilities from which one or more may be chosen. Simple things. You can have a sofa made in a choice of 40 fabrics. Another thing about a choice is that it's which one do you want? This disk drive is the perfect choice for this computer that I'm doing. Okay. There's choices that relate to when you vote for a candidate, you have a choice. Well, it's an option, an alternative, a possibility, a possible course of action, a solution, an answer, a way out. These are choices. So I think that as we talk more about choices, I want to just share something that my racquetball buddy Gary, who is one of my, do you want to be a millionaire or something and you want to call a friend? Gary's the friend that I call. I called him yesterday to say, hey, Gary, I'm talking about choices tomorrow. Give me some of your wisdom. And Gary is, he's got it. He didn't even hesitate. He says, let me tell you something about choices. The road of life is littered with flat squirrels who failed to make a decision. That's worth taking a pause. I'm gonna just hold on to that one for a second. And let's play with it. The road of life is littered with flat squirrels who fail to make a decision. Yeah, picture a squirrel in a highway that all of a sudden it doesn't know what to do. It looks left, it looks right, it looks left, it looks right, it looks left, it looks right. It doesn't look anymore because it just got run over. Wow. Yeah, I really like that Gary gave me that. And by the way, when I read my Reflections on Freedom article, I said in there a sentence that was freedom with without boundaries is chaos. And I've had a lot of compliments on that line because there are boundaries to freedom. You got to have the right. You got to have the right goodness. You got to. I'll just say you got to be listening to the Lord. Strive toward righteousness, to be good in the eyes of the Lord. Well, Gary gave me that line, and I put it into my article, and I just want everybody to know that Gary gave me that, and I thank him for that. Well, Gary's line about squirrels here, let's look at ourselves for a minute. Let's look at our indecisiveness. I'm going to use choices and decisions very similar today, and I'm going to lead more toward the decision side of taking a decision, doing something. I try to teach responsibility to people. I try to encourage people to look at who they are, what they're going through, show them what they might need, help them figure out what they might need, is a better way to say it, so that they make the right choices. They don't do things that have long-lasting, detrimental side effects. Gordy Graham, the most famous prisoner in United States prison history. I've told his story early out in my show. He was in prison for 1.5 years, and he didn't get out for 17 years because he just couldn't make the right choices. He just fought authority. He just rebelled too much. And in his seminar, Breaking Barriers, that's in every prison in the country, I believe that Breaking Barriers and Houses of Healing, Robin Kasarjan's program, are the two most successful programs right now in prisons across America to help people change. Gordy Graham, he used a phrase that I really, really like. He says, be careful of the rut that you get yourself in by making bad choices, because it's going to be with you for the next 30 years. He said it like this: choose your ruts carefully. You'll be in them for the next 30 years. Well, nobody, I don't think, chooses ruts. But what he is calling a rut is if you see a truck go through a dirt road over and over again, it forms a rut. And if you get stuck in a path that's called a rut, they're very, very hard to get out of sometimes. I use my own story that's kind of funny, I guess, when I talk to people about go home and look at yourself in the mirror tonight. Before you go to bed, look at yourself in the mirror. And I want you to really, really like what you see. I want you to like what you see in front of you as you watch yourself going through those changes that you've always tried to make in your life, those changes that you never knew when they were really coming, but now you see that they're happening. I want you to really like what you see as you see yourself going through that metamorphosis, that change of going from where you were to becoming that nerd that you've always wanted to be. Well, that's really stupid. I agree with that I'm saying, yeah, you're happy because you're turning into a nerd. But the point that I'm trying to bring out is simple. What's the definition of a nerd? What are the characteristics of a nerd? A nerd is someone who is very studious, kind of sometimes a social misfit, but they believe in trying to separate from the pack and wasting their time sometimes. I'm gonna just share with you, hey, we don't really want to be a nerd personality where we're withdrawn from society. But what I'm trying to say is when you see yourself stuck in a rut and you want to change and you don't know how to change perhaps, you've got to stop doing the same behavior that you've been doing that keeps you from moving forward. Most people that want to change that don't end up changing, they just don't know how to change. So we're gonna talk a little more about real change today, and I'm going to give you an example that I think is pretty good. It's about making decisions and changing your behavior. Here's a quote from Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. just came across that this morning. You know, if you're thinking negative and your belief system says that this is what I cannot do, then that's what's going to happen. You're never going to do it if you believe you can't do it. But conversely, if you believe you can, then you probably will. If you just get a plan and keep moving. I had a karate instructor way back in the early 70s named Frank Hargrove, and he was amazing. He always said, you can never lose as long as you have a plan and keep moving forward. I think that's pretty profound. Here's something that will help you make choices so that you can change your own behavior. Eleanor Roosevelt, you must do the thing you think you cannot do. That is absolutely beautiful. I love that. Let me read one more scriptural quote for you that we're basing this on. It's very hard to communicate, but I'm trying to tell you that for me at least, and I believe that this is sound advice, sound wisdom, because it comes right out of the Bible. Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. The Lord has commanded us to choose life. Now, I've said many times that one of the things that those of us that experience a lot of hardship, are faced with is some really, really difficult times that if you didn't have a sense of humor, you'd be crying a lot. And I say, I choose laughter. I'd rather get through life and accept what life is and then move forward. And that brings me to, I think, probably one of the most profound books ever written, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And when I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning a couple years ago, I knew that I must have read this book earlier in my life because I understood what he was saying and I'd heard it before. The basic concept of Viktor Frankl, who was a psychiatrist prior to World War II, living in Austria, and Austria was taken over by the Nazis. He got put into a concentration camp with his wife, brother and sister, and his parents. And only his sister and himself survived living in concentration camp. Everyone else died while he was in there. And the book, Man's Search for Meaning, it's a very short book. The first half of it is his actual experiences while he was in a concentration camp. Being a psychiatrist, he sort of analyzed and studied everything around him, and he tried to understand why some people completely gave up and quit and accepted that they were going to die, and they got to the deepest stages of depression, apathy, complete giving up, and then they died. And why others kept the will to live so strong that they were able to endure the horrific conditions and punishment that they went through and survive. One of the things that Viktor Frankl talked about